The hall of the National Melita Memorial glowed under the cold, unforgiving light of 1,000 crystal chandeliers. It was a space designed for gravity, for remembrance, yet tonight it hummed with a different kind of electricity. It was the annual Valor Awards, a spectacle of medals and polished brass, a theater for the nation's elite to see and be seen. General Mayor Cuss Stone, retired, stood by the pillar the east entrance, a glass of water untouched in his hand. His uniform, devoid of the stars he had rened, felt like a second skin of shame that he had worn for 3 years. He watched the crowd, a sea of tailored uniforms and glittering gowns, none of their gazes lingering on him for more than a fleeting, dismissive second. He was a relic, the ghost of a hero, now nothing more than a footnote. His son, Julian, was the reason he was here. Julian, his pride and his replacement, was to receive the Distinguished Service Cross tonight. It was a moment Mayor Cuss had dreamt of, a torch being passed. But as he watched Julian from across the room, laughing with a circle of young, ambitious colonels, a cold knot of suspicion tightened in his gut. Julian's smile was too wide, his gestures too theatrical. He was playing a role, the perfect, humble soldier, and Mayor Cuss knew that face. He had worn it himself during his own political ascension. The knot tightened into something rider, colder. He saw his ex-wife, Claire, elegantly draped in emerald silk, whispering to Senator Aldrich. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked RDSMA Cuss for a fraction of a second, a predator acknowledging the presence of a corpse. Then he heard the voice, honeyed and poisonous. The old lion, come to see his cub eat. It was Colonel Vance, his former aide-de-camp, the man who had been his shadow for a decade. Vance stood beside him, not looking at him, his eyes fixed on the stage. His uniform was immaculate, his posture rigid, a parody of the soldier he had once pretended to be. It's a shame, sir. The timing, I mean. For you. And Mayor Cuss said nothing. He let the silence stretch, his posture a pillar of stone. He knew the game. Vance was a snake who had shed his skin the moment Mayor Cuss's command had been challenged. He was the one who had whispered the first doubts to the Joint Chiefs, the one who had provided the context for Mayor Cuss's fateful decision in the Kharasan Valley, a decision that had saved 1,000 lives but cost him his career. A tragedy, really, Vance continued, the word dripping with false sympathy. The hero of the valley, reduced to this. Standing in the shadows at your own son's Rudy. I hear you're consulting for a security firm now. How quaint. And Mayor Cuss took a slow, deliberate sip of water. It's a living, Vance. You should try it. The responsibility might be a shock to your system after a lifetime of running errands. Vance's mask flickered, a brief, ugly flash of genuine anger. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You always did have a big mouth for a man who's nothing. An EMBA harassment. The BOA RD is reviewing your pension, you know, for conduct unbecoming. Julian, your beloved Julian, is the one who pushed it through. The words were a physical blow, but Mayor Cuss's face remained a granite mask. He looked past Vance, at his son, who was now making his way to the podium, his face a refully constructed mask of humility. Julian, the son he had raised, the son he had mentored, had been the final nail in his coffin. It wasn't just a military coup. It was a personal assassination. And Mayor Cuss had known there were leaks in his command, classified intel that had led to the disastrous miscommunication. He had suspected his inner circle, but he had always kept Julian as the wild RD, the one man above suspicion. He had been a fool. He's a better commander than you ever were. And Mayor Cuss, Vance hissed. He has vision. He understands that the old ways dead. All you had was your gut and a lot of lucky breaks. Is that what you told the Senate subcommittee? And Mayor Cuss asked, his voice flat, devoid of all inflection. That my gut was luck? I told them the truth, Vance snapped. That you're a liability. A loose cannon. A broken man who can't see the difference between strategy and sentiment. You should have retired with a shred of dignity. Instead, you're going to watch your son get the RD you never got. and then you're going to fade away. The crowd erupted in applause as Julian took the stage. The massive screen behind him displayed a montage of his heroic actions. A young, charismatic soldier leading his men through a marquette, shaking hands with local elders, looking confidently at a drone feed. It was theater, a reefily curated lie. Mayor Cuss knew the footage was from a training exercise. He saw the faces of the Joint Chiefs, the politicians, the media. They were all part of the machine that had chewed him up and spit him out. Julian Clea read his throat, his voice amplified across the hall. "This moment is not for me," Julian began, his tone humble. "It is for the men and women who serve without recognition. It is for the legacy of those who came before us, who fought for the freedom we enjoy today. Men like my father." Americus felt the eyes of the room shift to him, a mixture of pity and amusement. He was the ghost at the feast. Julian's speech was a masterpiece of manipulation. He spoke of his father's old RD tactics, his unconventional methods, wrapping them in a blanket of nostalgia while subtly undermining them. He was using his father's fall as a stepping stone, a cautionary tale of how the world had changed and old soldiers were left behind. "My father taught me many things," Julian said, his voice catching with practiced emotion. "But the most important lesson he taught me was that the mission is always bigger than the man. That to lead, you must be willing to sacrifice." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. It was a hard lesson, a lesson that cost him everything. Americus saw the cracks in his son's performance, the slight tremble in his hand, the way his eyes root to the wings, where Claire was now standing next to General Morrison, the man who had replaced him. The puzzle pieces began to click into place. The abandoned mission, the withheld intel, the public humiliation. It wasn't just ambition. It was a redinated assassination. And Julian, his son, was the executioner. Vance nudged him, a mocking grin on his face. "The Lion's ERT, sir. Right there on the stage. He's going to be the youngest chairman in history. And you." He let out a small, contemptuous laugh. "You're going to watch." Americus set his water glass down on the table. The sound RP and final in the momentary lull of the applause. The cold knot in his gut had turned to ice. He had lived a life of making decisions based on incomplete intel, of trusting his instincts in the face of overwhelming odds. He had been so focused on the threat from the outside that he had missed the enemy within his own house. He had spent the last 3 years in a self-imposed exile, tending to a small farm in upstate New York, a man trying to outrun his own past. He had been grieving the life he'd lost, the purpose, the family. He had been weak, allowing their narrative to become his own. But standing here, in the hallowed hall of his greatest triumphs, the ice began to crack, revealing a fire he thought had been extinguished. He wasn't just a relic. He was a goddamn 4SDA, our general. And he was done being the victim. Julian was concluding his speech, his face shining with fake TRS. "This our RD is for every soldier who has ever been told they are not enough. For every commander who has been forced to make the impossible choice. I will CARRY your legacy 4-way RD, father. I promise." The crowd rose to its feet, a standing ovation for the young hero. But Americus wasn't looking at Julian anymore. He was looking at the control booth at the back of the hall. He saw the man in the booth, a young technician, fumbling with a tablet. Americus had been the architect of the Valor RDS ceremony for a decade. He knew every wire, every backup system, every protocol. He knew something they didn't. He began to walk, not Tower RDS the stage, but Tower RDS the side exit. Vance saw him move. "Where were you going, General?" "To slink back to your hole." Americus paused, his back to his former aide. "No, Colonel. I'm going to find a microphone." He didn't go for a microphone. Not yet. He went for the vault. The National Melita Memorial wasn't just a hall of trophies. It was a digital fortress, housing the classified after-action reports of every major U.S. Melita re-operation since the Korean WAR. It was his legacy, the place he had fought to build. He knew the building's layout better than the janitorial staff. The security, a biometric system he had personally approved, was impenetrable to outsiders. To him, it was a collection of backdoors he had coded himself. He bypassed the main corridors, slipping through a service door that led to the basement archives. The air grew still and smelled of old paper and ozone. The hum of the servers was a low, comforting drone. He reached the end of a long corridor, his boots echoing on the polished concrete floor. He placed his thumb on a panel that seemed to be part of the wall, a hidden reader that hadn't been updated in the last decade. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was a digital morgue. Dozens of monitors lined the walls, and a master console sat in the center. This was the heart of the memorial, the Black Room, known only to a handful of people. Americus sat down at the console. His fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing firewalls and encryption layers that were supposed to be the most advanced in the world. He was a ghost in the machine. He needed the original comms logs from the Khorasan Valley operation, the ones that had been corrupted, the ones that would prove his orders were doctored, that the disaster that had ended his career was an inside job. He needed to prove that the narrative they had built around him was a complete fabrication. He had never saved those lives. He had followed orders. But the orders he was given had been a trap, designed to make him look like a reckless maverick who had gone against protocol. The real orders, the ones that would have led to a massacre, were on a separate rate channel. They had been erased, or so they thought. His CRCH was interrupted by a soft chime. A message app read on a second-day remonitor. General, sir. We need to talk. Now. Julian. The little snake had a direct line to the memorial system. Of course he did. He was the golden boy. And Mayor Cuss ignored it, continuing his CRCH. He dove deep into the encrypted storage, sifting through the digital debris. He found the audio logs. They were fragmented, spliced, a technical mess. But the raw data was there. The timestamps were wrong, the voice signatures corrupted. But he had written a soft way to analyze these logs. He was the only one who could RSE the truth from the digital lie. He ran a decryption protocol he had developed himself, a process that would take several minutes. As the machine hummed, he monitored the memorial's main feed on a separate rate screen. The ceremonies were winding down. The attendees were settling back into their seats for the keynote address, a speech by the Secretary of Defense. A man in Americus had watched live to Congress with a straight face that he saw his son, Julian, basking in the glow, his ARM, a round Claire. Julian was smiling, but it was a tight, anxious smile. He was checking his phone. He knew Americus had made a move. He was SCA read. Good. The decryption finished. A single, crystal clear, our audio file popped up on the screen. It was the voice of Colonel Vance, speaking to a now-deceased intelligence officer. The timestamp was 12 hours before the Khorasan mission. That I don't see what the general thinks, Vance's voice said. Shah RP and cutting. The family has decided. We need the asset eliminated. Americus is too principled, too old to see the bigger picture. We need a failure. We need him broken, so the son can take his place. Understood, Colonel, the other voice replied. The data package has been sent to the insurgents' communications line. We'll have them scramble the comms. And Mayor Cuss will be flying blind. He'll get the altered orders and walk into the ambush. His reaction, his violation of the new orders, will be recorded as insubordination. We'll pin it all on him. And Mayor Cuss listened to the cold, merciless words with a sense of chilling CLA righty. His entire career, his entire life, had been dismantled by a family conspiracy. Claire, Julian Vance. They weren't just ambitious. They were traitors. They had conspired with an enemy agent to provide intel to insurgents, orchestrating a situation that would get American soldiers killed. Just so Julian could inherit his father's crown. The ice in his veins was now a furnace of cold, righteous fury. He had the proof, not just of his own innocence, but of their guilt. High treason, conspiracy, culpability for the deaths of 23 soldiers in the ensuing chaos. The file was a nuclear bomb. He downloaded the file onto a secure, portable drive. He had a physical key to this drive that only he possessed. The digital archive was now a target. He needed to get his hands on a RD copy of the original mission brief, the one they had altered. It was stored in a biometric safe in the chairman's office that he left the black room and navigated back through the service corridors. The noise of the ceremony was just beyond the walls, a muffled ROAR. He reached the second floor, the executive level. The chairman's office was a massive corner suite, empty now. He bypassed the keypad lock with another of his old overrides. The soft click of the door opening a satisfying sound. He was inside. The room was a monument to Melita Repower. Flags lined the walls. Photos of the chairman shaking hands with presidents looked down upon him. He went directly to the safe. It was a massive steel box embedded in the wall. He input a sequence of codes, a method of psychological security he had designed. The date of his first command, the date of his wedding, the date of his last combat jump. The safe door swung open. Inside, nestled in a velvet-lined tray, was a single manila folder. It was the original mission brief for the Khurasan Valley, the one with the correct orders, the ones that had been overruled by the doctor version. The paper was the only physical proof. He placed it inside his jacket. The digital file on the drive was the kill shot, the smoking gun. The HRD copy was the unassailable truth. He was about to leave when he heard the voices. They were approaching. He's here. I told you. He's trying to find something. It was Julian's voice, laced with panic. He's broken. He's just a senile old man clutching at ghosts. Claire's voice replied, coldly confident. Let him. We have everything. The media is primed. By the time the night is over, he'll be nothing more than a caution, a retail. Just get him out of here. Make sure he doesn't make a scene. Americus pressed himself against the wall behind the door. He wasn't afraid. He was a predator in the den of his prey. He saw Julian and Claire enter, followed by Senator Aldrich. They were a triumvirate of ambition, the architects of his fall. They didn't see him. Their eyes were on the safe. Julian's face drained of color as he saw the open safe, the empty velvet tray. He took it. Impossible, Vance said, pushing his way in, his face a mask of fury. He can't have the combination. Americus stepped out from behind the door. He didn't make a sound, just ape read. He was a giant in the room, a monument of control violence. The effect was immediate. Vance froze, his hand instinctively going to his side. Claire stepped back, her eyes wide. Julian looked like a deer caught in headlights. Senator Aldrich, the consummate politician, just STA red, his face CA reefully neutral. Looking for something, Julian? Americus asked, his voice a low rumble. An obituary, perhaps? Father, Julian stammered, trying to regain his composure. You're YMBA rassing yourself. You're not well. You need to come with me. I'm perfectly well, Americus said. I'm Clea are headed for the first time in 3 years. He held up the folder. I have the original mission brief, Julian, the one you and your mother conspire to hide. I have the voice logs of Vance negotiating with an enemy agent. That's a lie. Vance SNA roulette, pulling aside a RM and aiming it at Americus. You're a delusional old man. Don't make me shoot you. Do it, Americus said, his gaze unwavering. Shoot me in the chairman's office. A retired 4SDA, our general. In front of the senator. Tell me how that helps your story. Tell me how it helps Julian's CA rear. Vance's hand was shaking. He was a man who had built his CA rear on shadow and whispers, not on direct confrontation. He couldn't pull the trigger. The reality of the situation was crashing down on him. Claire stepped four-way road. We are not going to be blackmailed by you, Americus. We have the family. We have the narrative. We have the Department of Justice in our pocket. That folder is nothing. Americus walked past them, his path clear. He was heading for the door. He stopped at the threshold and turned back. He looked at Julian, his eyes devoid of all RMTH. You're right, Claire, he said. The folder is nothing. It's what's on the screen at the ceremony that matters. The main ceremony was reaching its crescendo. The Secretary of Defense was at the podium, droning on about the future of the Melita Re, about the brave young men and women who would CARRY the torch. The crowd was restless, their attention wandering. They had come for the spectacle, for the AWA RDS, for the chance to see and be seen. The politicians were bored. They were ready for the cocktail hour. The generals were impatient. They had reports to file. And Mayor Cuss stood at the edge of the stage, just behind a heavy velvet curtain. He was a ghost in the wings, watching the machinery of the state churn on without him. His hand was in his pocket, the cold, metallic shape of the secure, drive a talisman of finality. The manila folder was tucked inside his jacket. He saw Julian, Claire, Vance, and the senator hurrying back to their seats. They were scanning the crowd, looking for him. Their faces were taut with panic. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. The Secretary of Defense concluded his speech with a rousing call to duty. The crowd applauded politely. The Master of Ceremonies, a glib television personality, stepped forward RD to introduce the final surprise of the evening, a tribute to the fallen soldiers of the Khorassan Valley. And Mayor Cuss's stomach churned. They were going to use the dead to prop up the lie. They were going to honor the very men who died because of their treason. A montage began to play on a massive screen behind the stage. Images of the fallen flashed on the screen, young, smiling faces. The families who had been flown in for the occasion were seated in the front row, their faces etched with grief. The music swelled. The crowd fell silent. It was a masterstroke of manipulation, a fake tribute to cover up a real crime. And Mayor Cuss saw his moment. The focus of the room was on the screen. He stepped onto the stage. He was a quiet, controlled shadow moving through the periphery of the spotlight. The Master of Ceremonies didn't see him. The Secretary of Defense, now standing beside him, was too busy looking somber that he reached the podium. The Master of Ceremonies looked up, STA riled. General Stone, he stammered into his own mic. What are you doing? And Mayor Cuss didn't answer. He gently, but firmly, moved the MC aside. He leaned into the microphone, his voice a low, powerful rumble that cut through the soft music. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, he said, I am General and Mayor Cuss Stone. I'm here to provide the counterpoint to the evening's narrative. The room went silent. The montage froze on a picture of a smiling young corporal. The families in the front row looked up, confused. The Secretary of Defense looked at him with a mixture of shock and contempt. He went to stop him, but Mayor Cuss raised a hand, a gesture of command so ingrained that the Secretary, a man who outranked him now, actually paused. I was the commanding officer of the Khorassan Valley operation, and Mayor Cuss said, his voice steady. For 3 years, I have been silent. I have allowed the military, the media, and my own family to paint me as an incompetent, a relic of a bygone era who got his men killed. That narrative is a lie. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the secure drive. He held it up. On this drive is a recording of my former aide-de-camp, Colonel Vance, conspiring with a foreign agent to compromise our comms and provide actionable intelligence to an enemy force. The goal was to create a failure, to remove me from command so that my son, Julian, could take my place. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Julian was on his feet, his face white with rage and terror. He's insane. He's having a psychotic break. Security Gua RDS STA route to move Tawa RDS the stage. And Mayor Cuss looked at them, his eyes blazing. I'm a 4 SDA, Art General of the United States, May, retired. You'll stand down. The Gua RDS hesitated. The authority in his voice, the sheer force of his presence, was an almost tangible thing. They knew who he was. He had been their commander-in-chief on 100 battlefields. They stopped. Let me be perfectly clear, Mayor Cuss continued, his voice rising, not in volume, but in intensity. The failure of the Khorassan mission was not a failure of intelligence. It was a failure of leadership, motivated by personal ambition and greed. My son, Julian, who you just honored, has been a co-conspirator in this plot. He knew what was happening. He provided his mother with confidential information about troop movements to help Vance frame me. He is not a hero. He is a traitor. The crowd was in chaos. People were standing up, shouting. The media were rushing 4-way RD, cameras flashing. It was a feeding frenzy. and Mayor Cuss saw Julian trying to push through the crowd, heading for a side exit. Vance was frozen in his seat, his face a mask of utter terror. Claire was screaming at the security guardias to do something. And Mayor Cuss knew he had to deliver the final blow. He had to make it impossible for them to spin their way out of this. He pointed at the frozen screen behind him, at the picture of the young corporal. His name is Thomas Williams. And Mayor Cuss said, his voice dropping, becoming raw with emotion. He was 22 years old. He had a wife and a 2-year-old daughter. He died because this man, he pointed at Vance, this gutless rat, wanted to advance his career. He died because my son wanted a promotion. He turned to the families in the front row. You have been lied to. You have been used. The blood of your loved ones is on their hands. I am giving you the truth. I am giving you justice. He then pulled the manila folder from his jacket. This is the original mission brief. It proves that the orders I followed were the correct ones. It proves that I was ordered to do exactly what I did. The narrative of my insubordination is a fabrication. He dropped the folder onto the podium. I am not here to ask for your forgiveness or your sympathy. I am here to tell you the truth. The cover-up is over. The conspiracy ends tonight. He turned his back on the chaos. He walked off the stage, his footsteps calm and measured. He didn't look back. He could hear the shouts of the crowd, the frantic pleading of his ex-wife, the impotent rage of his son. They were all noised out. He walked down the steps and into the main lobby of the memorial. He was heading for the exit. His heart was pounding, but his face was a mask of iron. He had done what he came here to do. He had planted the seed of truth. The rest would take care of itself. He was just outside the grand doors, the still night air hitting his face when he heard a voice. General Stone. It was a young woman, a reporter from a major news network. She was breathless, her cameraman running behind her. General, what are you going to do now? You going to press charges? You going to take them to court? And Mayor Cuss looked at her. His mission was over. The press was the final trigger. He had given them the story. He had given them the evidence. The machine would grind them to dust that he didn't answer her. He just looked at the camera for a single, long moment, his face a portrait of stoic resolve. Then he turned and walked away, to sap a ring into the night. The news cycle exploded, and Mayor Cuss didn't watch it. He went back to his farm. He knew the story would play out without his intervention. He had given the media the rope, and they were hanging his enemies with it. He sat on his porch, the silence of the countryside, a stark contrast to the chaos he had created. The only sound was the wind in the trees and the distant lowing of his neighbor's cattle. He was alone. That was the point. He had been alone for 3 years, but now the loneliness felt different. It felt like victory. His phone, which he had left inside, was buzzing incessantly. He had silenced it before the ceremony, knowing the storm that would follow. He had no interest in the pleas, the threats, or the apologies. He had read their souls in that room, and he had seen nothing but the rot within. The next morning, he went into town for supplies. The small-town diner was buzzing with activity. Every television was tuned to a cable news channel. His face was on every screen. They were playing a loop of his speech. The headline screamed, "Stone Cold. General blows whistle on Melita re-conspiracy." The waitress, a young woman named S.A. Rahu, had always treated him with friendly indifference, looked at him with wide eyes. "General Stone, is that really you?" He just nodded. He ordered his usual, black coffee and toast. He didn't look at the screens. He didn't need to. He knew what they were saying. The news was already spreading beyond the Melita community. Vance had been arrested at the memorial, taken into custody by Melita police. He was facing a court trial for treason. Senator Aldrich was under investigation, his office raided at dawn. The Secretary of Defense had issued a statement expressing profound shock and dismay, calling for a full, independent investigation. It was a move of pure self-preservation, a desperate attempt to distance himself from the sinking ship. The story was a bottomless well of scandal, a narrative of familial betrayal, corruption at the highest levels, and a hero's fall and redemption. It was a ratings goldmine. The networks were interviewing insiders, retired generals, intelligence analysts, Anyone who could offer a sliver of insight into the mind of America Stone that he didn't watch any of it. He knew the truth. The rest was just theater. He was in his BAR and mending a fence when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but he answered it anyway. He was in a mood for confrontation. General Stone, a voice said. It was male, older, and filled with a familiar bureaucratic confidence. This is Senator Clark. I'm the chairman of the Senate Remembrance Services Committee. I know who you are, Senator, America said, his voice flat. I need you to come to Washington, General, the senator said. This is a matter of national security. We need you to testify. The committee needs to hear the full story from you. We need your evidence. We need to get to the bottom of this rot. America leaned against the fence post. I've already given the world the evidence, Senator. It's on every screen in the country. You have a recording. You have the documents. That's not enough, General, Senator Clark pressed. We need you to make it official. We need you to be the face of this investigation. You are the only one who can lead the way. America was silent for a long moment. He thought about the halls of Congress, the endless hearings, the political grandstanding. He thought about sitting in a room, reliving the worst moments of his life, picking at old wounds while politicians used his pain for their own political gain. No, he said. Excuse me, Senator Clark sputtered. General, I don't think you understand. This is a matter of... I understand perfectly. America cut him off. I understand that you want me to come to Washington to be a prop in your political theater. You want me to sit in a chair, be interviewed by a bunch of ambitious politicians, and have my pain paw arrayed around for the cameras. I've already done my RT. I've exposed them. What happens next is up to the lawyers and the system. General, the Melita Ree's reputation is at stake. Clark, arrogant, that's not my concern anymore, America said. My concern is the families. I gave them the truth. The rest of this is just noise. Goodbye, Senator. He hung up the phone. He didn't feel a sense of accomplishment. He felt a sense of weariness. The game was over. He had won. But what had he really won? The love of his son was gone. His ex-wife was exposed for the monster she was. His legacy, the career he had built, was in ruins. He had been vindicated, but the cost was everything. A few hours later, a CA pulled up to his farmhouse. It was a black sedan, federal government issue. 2 men into RK suits got out. They were from the Department of Justice. They were there to secure the evidence and to offer him federal protection. We need to debrief you, General, one of the agents said. Your safety is a concern. There are people who are going to be very angry about what you've done. And Mayor Cuss looked at them, unimpressed. I've had people try to kill me in 3 different war zones, son. A few angry lawyers don't me. He gave them the physical evidence, the original folder, the secure drive. He gave them the location of the files in the memorial's databanks. He gave them everything. He didn't want to be a witness. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to be left alone. As they drove away, the second agent asked, "What do you think he's going to do now?" The first agent shook his head. "I have no idea. He's an enigma, a man who had the world by the tail and just walked away from it." They were right. He was an enigma. He was a man who had finally stopped running from his past and had confronted it head-on. He had won the war, but he had lost a family. There was no going back. 3 months passed. The scandal had become a federal case, a multi-billion-dollar legal nightmare for the Department of Defense. Vance had been convicted, sentenced to life in a Melita prison. Claire and Julian had been indicted on multiple counts of conspiracy and treason. The hearings were a media circus, but Mayor Cuss had refused to participate. His absence was a statement in itself. He had found a new rhythm in his isolation. The FARM was his sanctuary. The simple act of planting seeds and mending fences was a meditation. It was a way to reclaim a part of himself that had been lost in the bureaucracy and the betrayal. He had almost begun to heal that one evening. A familia, pulled up to his farmhouse. It was a rental, a nondescript sedan. A man got out. He was tall, with graying hair and the ramrod straight posture of a rear soldier. It was General Frank Morrison, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the man who had replaced him. Morrison walked up to the porch, looking as uncomfortable as a man who had to deliver bad news to a superior. "Americus," he said, his voice formal. "Frank," Americus replied. He didn't offer a handshake. He just leaned against the porch railing, waiting. "That I'm not here on official business," Morrison said. "I'm here as a friend." Americus snorted. "We were never friends, Frank. You took my job. You watched me get dismantled. You didn't say a word." Morrison flinched. "It wasn't that simple. You know it wasn't. The world was different then. I had to protect the institution. And the institution protected traitors," Americus said, his voice like ice. "It protected my ex-wife and my own son. It protected the men who killed our soldiers." Morrison was silent for a long moment. "I know," he finally said. "We failed you. I failed you. But I'm here now because I need your help." Americus just looked at him, his face unreadable. "The prosecution is in a bind," Morrison continued. "Julian's lawyers, good. They're building a defense based on mental incompetence. They're trying to paint him as a puppet of his mother and Vance. They're going to try to walk him out of this." And Americus asked, "And his ring?" Morrison said. "Julian has a signet ring. It was your grandfather's. It has the Stone family crest on it. Julian was we ring it at the ceremony. He gave a speech about legacy and family." Americus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What about it?" Morrison pulled a small evidence bag from his jacket. Inside was a tiny, almost invisible fragment of metal. "This was found embedded in the CEA repet of the chairman's office after you left. It's a piece from a micro-recorder, a state-of-the-art surveillance device. We found a matching one in the lock of the safe you opened." Americus's eyes widened. "He recorded me. He recorded everything," Morrison said. "The entire conversation in the chairman's office. Your confrontation with him, Claire, Vance, and Aldrich. He was we-ring the recorder along with the ring. His lawyers, using it to build a defense. They're going to argue that he was acting under duress, that he knew his mother was capable of murder, and that he was playing along to survive. They're going to paint you as the aggressor, the one who broke into the chairman's office, the one who threatened them. The recording shows him begging you to stop, telling you he wasn't involved. It's his only CARD, and he's going to play it." Americus felt the world tilt. He had been so focused on exposing the conspiracy, on delivering the evidence to the world, that he had underestimated the deviousness of his own son. He had walked into a trap, and Julian had recorded it all. "He was we ring a wire," Americus said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "He had it planned all along." "Yes," Morrison said, his voice heavy with resignation. "He was prepared for you. He knew you'd go for the evidence. He manipulated you into proving his case for him. He's using your own actions to exonerate himself." Americus sat down on the porch swing. He felt the weight of Yaris pressing down on him. He had thought he had won. He had thought he had delivered the final blow. But Julian, the master manipulator, had played him again. He was using the system Americus had dedicated his life to protect himself from the consequences of his betrayal. "Your grandfather's ring," Americus said, his voice a whisper. "The one my father gave me. The one I gave to Julian on his 18th birthday. He used it to frame me." "We can fight it," Morrison said. "We can argue the context. We can point out the timing. But the recording is damning. It shows you breaking into a federal facility. It shows you threatening a senator and a sitting general. It shows you as the aggressor. It's exactly what his lawyers need to create reasonable doubt." Americus looked at his hands. They were the hands of a soldier, GNA red and SCA red by a lifetime of service. They had held a rifle in a dozen different countries. They had written orders that had saved thousands of lives. And now, they were the hands of a man who had been outmaneuvered by his own son. "I need to see him," Americus said, his voice flat and harrowed. "What?" Morrison asked, surprised. "Americus, that's a terrible idea. He's in a federal detention center. He's surrounded by lawyers. Anything you say to him will be recorded. He'll use it against you. He's already proven he's capable of that." "I don't see Americus said. "He's my son, and I need to look him in the eye. I need to hear him say it. I need to know if there's anything left in there worth saving, or if he's just a hollow shell of ambition like his mother." Morrison shook his head. It's a trap, and may your cuss. Don't you see that he's counting on you to come to him? He's counting on your sentiment. It's the last card in his hand. And Mayor Cuss stood up. He was a man who had made a decision. Then I'll take the road. I'll take it, and I'll burn it. Arrange it. I'll go tomorrow. Morrison looked at him for a long moment, urging for a hint of doubt. He found none. I'll make the call. But I'm telling you, this is a mistake. Maybe, and Mayor Cuss said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. But it's my mistake to make. The Federal Detention Center was a fortress of gray concrete and razor wire, a monument to the failures of the men it housed. And Mayor Cuss walked through the security checkpoint with the calm of a man who had stormed beaches and breached enemy compounds. The guardias recognized him. They didn't salute, but their posture stiffened. They knew who he was. They knew what he had done. They stepped aside without a word. He was led to a small visitation room. The walls were the lighting hot RSH and fluorescent. A single metal table stood in the center, bolted to the floor. 2 chairs faced each other, and Mayor Cuss sat down and waited. He didn't wait long. The door on the opposite side of the room opened, and Julian was let in. He wore an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled. His hair was unkempt, his face gaunt. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. But his eyes, those calculating eyes, were still Shah RP. They assessed Mayor Cuss immediately, looking for weakness, for an angle that the guardi unshackled Julian and left the room. The door clicked shut, leaving father and son alone in the sterile silence. Julian sat down across from him. He didn't speak. He just read, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. He was waiting. He was playing his game. And Mayor Cuss broke the silence. You look well, Julian. Considering. Julian laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Considering I'm facing life in prison, thanks, Dad. Your concern is touching. I didn't come here to offer comfort, and Mayor Cuss said, then why did you come? Julian leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. To gloat to see your masterpiece up, clothes you got what you wanted, didn't you? You destroyed me. You destroyed Mom. You destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything, and Mayor Cuss said, his voice low and steady. You did that yourself. You and your mother. You conspired to get American soldiers killed. You fed intel to the enemy. You framed your own father for a crime he didn't commit. That wasn't me. That was you. Julian's smirk faltered. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, regret, it was gone before Mayor Cuss could name it. You don't know anything, Julian said, his voice rising. You were never there. You were always too busy being the great General Stone, the hero of the valley, to see what was right in front of you. Mom was right about you. You were always so self-righteous, so sure of your own moral superiority. You couldn't see that the world was changing, that the old rules didn't apply anymore. So you decided to change the rules, Mayor Cuss said. You decided to kill 23 of your own men to prove a point. Julian slammed his fist on the table. They weren't my men. They were yours. You got them killed with your arrogance, with your refusal to adapt. I just accelerated the process. I was doing the Melita a favor. You were a relic, Dad, a dinosaur, and I was the meteor that was going to take you out. And Mayor Cuss felt a cold fury building in his chest, but he kept his face impassive. He had seen men break under interrogation. He had seen them confess to horrors with TRS in their eyes. But Julian wasn't breaking. He was defiant. He was proud of what he had done. It was worse than Mayor Cuss had imagined. You recorded me, Mayor Cuss said, changing tack, in the chairman's office. You were wearing a wire. Julian's smirk returned, wider this time. You figured that out. How took you long enough? Yeah, I recorded it all. Every word, every threat, every piece of evidence you used to destroy me. And now, my lawyers, Rigo, use it to set me free. And Mayor Cuss leaned back in his chair. Is that what you think that you're going to walk out of here? I know I am, Julian said. The recording shows you breaking into a federal facility. It shows you threatening a sitting senator. It shows you as the aggressor. I'm just a red kid trying to survive his father's mania. That's the narrative. And it's going to work. And Mayor Cuss reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and placed it on the table between them. It was a photograph. It showed Julian and Claire at a party years ago. They were laughing, their arms around each other. In the background, a man was visible. He was tall, with the arcade hair and a familiar face. It was the intelligence officer who had been killed in the Kharasan Valley. The one Vance had been speaking to on the recording. Julian's face went pale. Where did you get that? I have my sources, America said. That man was your contact. He was the one who facilitated the leak. He was the one who gave the insurgents the comms data. He was your partner in crime. And now he's dead. But his records, rent. Julian's hand was trembling. He tried to hide it, but America saw. That doesn't prove anything. That's just a picture. Anyone could have been at that party. True, America said. But his phone records show dozens of calls to your private line in the months leading up to the operation. His email account contains encrypted messages from a user with an IP address that traces back to your mother's estate. And his GRE, which we recovered from his APA mentions you by name. Specifically, it mentions a meeting you had with him 3 weeks before the mission. A meeting where you discussed the timeline of the leak. Julian was silent. His face was a mask of controlled panic. He was trying to find a way out, a loophole, a counter-argument. But there was none. And Mayor Cuss had just put the final nail in his coffin. You think you're so smart, Julian finally said, his voice a whisper. You think you've won. But you haven't. You've lost everything. Your CA rear, your wife, your son. You're a lonely old man on a farm in the middle of nowhere. And when I walk out of here, I'm going to rebuild. I'm going to find a way to come back. And when I do, I'll destroy you all over again. And Mayor Cuss stood up. He looked down at his son, his face an unreadable mask of stone. You're not walking out of here, Julian. That recording you made, the one you think is your get-out-of-jail-free CARD, I've already leaked it to the press. The full, unedited version. The one that shows you not just begging for mercy, but actively participating in the conspiracy. The one that proves you were the architect of the whole thing. They'll have it on every channel by tonight. Julian's face contorted with rage and disbelief. You're lying. You don't have that. I have everything, Mayor Cuss said. I've had it for weeks. I just wanted to see you squirm first. I wanted you to think you had a way out, so I could watch you fall. So I could see the look on your face when you realized it was over. He walked out RDS the door. He paused and looked back. You're a dead man, Julian. Not physically, but your legacy, your name, everything you ever wanted to be, it's gone. It's over. And that's a fate worse than any prison sentence. He knocked on the door. The guardi opened it from the outside, and Mayor Cuss stepped through, leaving his son alone in the sterile room. As the door closed, he heard Julian's voice, a raw, primal scream of rage. It echoed through the corridor, bouncing off the cold concrete walls. And Mayor Cuss didn't stop. He walked on, his footsteps steady and sure that he had won. But the victory tasted like ashes, that he didn't sleep that night. The farmhouse was silent, the kind of silence that presses in on a man and makes him hear his own heartbeat. And Mayor Cuss sat on the porch, a glass of bourbon in his hand, watching the STARS wheel overhead. He had done what he set out to do. He had exposed the conspiracy. He had destroyed his enemies. He had watched his son's face crumble into rage and despair. It should have felt like victory. It felt like a funeral. The morning came gray and cold. A light rain was falling, misting the fields and turning the dirt roads to mud. And Mayor Cuss was in the barn, feeding the horses, when he heard the sound of tires on gravel. He looked up. A black SUV was pulling into his driveway. Federal plates. He recognized the 2 agents who got out. They were the same ones from the Department of Justice who had come to collect his evidence 3 months ago. Their faces were grim, and Mayor Cuss set down the feed bucket and walked out to meet them. He didn't say anything. He just waited. General Stone, the lead agent, said, "We need you to come with us." "Why?" Mayor Cuss asked. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "There's been a development," the agent said. "Julian Stone escaped from the detention center last night. He had help from the inside. We believe he's heading for the Canadian border. We need to debrief you. We need to know if he contacted you, if he made any threats." And Mayor Cuss felt a cold chill run down his spine. but his face remained a mask. He didn't contact me. I haven't spoken to him since the visitation. We know, the agent said. We have his phone records, but we need to be thorough. We need you to come with us now, for your own safety. And Mayor Cuss looked past the agents at the misty fields. He thought about Julian's face in the visitation room, the rage, the defiance, the promise. He remembered the words. I'm going to find a way to come back. And when I do, I'll destroy you all over again. He had thought it was just bravado, the ranting of a broken man. But Julian wasn't broken. He was a survivor. He had been playing a long game, and Mayor Cuss had only just realized it. The escape wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan. Julian had been waiting for the right moment, and he had found it. I'll come with you, Mayor Cuss said. But I'm driving myself. I'll follow you. The agents exchanged a look. General, that's not protocol. We need to have you in a secure vehicle. I don't see a about protocol, Mayor Cuss said. I've been a general for 30 years. I followed protocols that got men killed. I'm not following any more of them. I'll follow you to the field office. You can debrief me there, but I'm driving my own truck. The lead agent hesitated. He looked at his partner, then back at Mayor Cuss. Fine, but we'll have a CA tailing you the whole way. If you deviate from the route, we'll have to take more aggressive measures. Mayor Cuss nodded. Understood. He walked back to the BARN and got his truck. It was an old Ford, beat up and reliable. He rooted the engine and pulled out of the driveway, the black SUV following close behind. Another CA fell in behind them. They were running a full escort, a convoy of federal agents. They were treating him like a witness in a mob trial. They were SCA red, and they had every right to be that the drive to the field office took 2 hours. And Mayor Cuss didn't listen to the radio. He didn't think about the past or the future. He focused on the road, on the present moment. It was a survival instinct, a skill he had honed in combat. You don't think about the next bullet. You think about the next step. When they arrived, the field office was a hive of activity. Agents were running back and forth. Phones were ringing. Monitors were glowing with maps and satellite images. Julian was a ghost, a phantom that had slipped through their fingers. The manhunt was on to Mayor Cuss was led to a small interrogation room. It was a mirror image of the one he had visited Julian in. BA walls, fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor. He sat down and waited that the lead agent came in with a stack of files. We have a problem, General. Julian's escape wasn't just an inside job. It was a coordinated operation. He had help from a network of sympathizers, people who believe he was framed, who believe he's a political prisoner. And Mayor Cuss raised an eyebrow. Sympathizers, he's a traitor. He got American soldiers killed. We know that, the agent said. But the narrative has been twisted. There are fringe groups, militia types, who see him as a hero, as a victim of a corrupt system. They're the ones who orchestrated the escape, and they're the ones who are going to try to make a statement. And Mayor Cuss leaned back in his chair. What kind of statement? The agent looked at him, his face grim. We believe they're planning a public rants, a rally, somewhere they can show him off as a symbol of resistance. And we believe they're going to use you as the focus. They're going to make you the villain. They're going to paint you as the architect of a conspiracy to silence a whistleblower. It's going to be a circus. And Mayor Cuss felt a cold anger rising in his chest. Julian had done it again. He had turned the narrative on its head. He had taken the evidence Mayor Cuss had used to destroy him and twisted it into a weapon against his own father. It was the final act of a master manipulator. They're not going to get away with it. And Mayor Cuss said, "We're doing everything we can," the agent said. "We have teams tracking him across 3 states. We have the border on lockdown. We'll catch him, but we need your help. We need you to stay here, to stay safe, to let us handle it." And Mayor Cuss shook his head. "No, General, I said no," and Mayor Cuss said, his voice harrowed. "I'm not going to sit here and hide while my son turns himself into a martyr. I'm not going to let him rewrite history. I'm going to be there, at whatever rally they're planning, and I'm going to end this." The agent read at him, a mixture of disbelief and horror on his face. "General, that's suicide. They'll kill you. They'll use your death as a rallying cry. It's exactly what they want. Then they'll have to try, Americus said. I didn't survive 30 RS in the Melita and 3 RS of exile to let my own son destroy the last shred of my legacy. I'm going to face him, and I'm going to finish what I sta root. He stood up. He walked to the door. The agent didn't try to stop him. He's your son, the agent said, his voice soft. Are you really willing to kill your own son? Americus paused at the door. He didn't turn around. He stopped being my son the moment he sold out his men. The moment he sold out his country. The moment he tried to destroy me. He made his choice. Now I'm making mine. He walked out of the room, into the chaos of the field office. The agent's paw root around him, a sea of grim faces. They knew what he was going to do. They knew they couldn't stop him. He walked out into the rain. The sky was dark, the clouds low and heavy. He got into his truck and sta rooted the engine. He had no idea where the rally was. He had no idea how to find Julian. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty, that his son was coming for him. And when he did, Americus would be ready to. He drove into the storm that the rain hammered against the windshield, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in Americus's chest. He drove for hours, following nothing but instinct and the ghost of a lead the agents had let slip. A town, a fairground, a rally scheduled for sundown. He didn't know how Julian had arranged it, didn't see a re. He just knew where he had to be. The fairgrounds were a sea of mud and flags when he arrived. Makeshift banners flapped in the wind, emblazoned with slogans he couldn't read from the truck. A crowd had gathered, 100 or more, their faces lit by the RSHGLA re of portable floodlights. They were waiting. They were chanting. And on a crude wooden stage at the center of it all stood Julian. He was wearing a black tactical vest, his ARMS raised like a prophet addressing his followers. He looked nothing like the hollow, shackled man Americus had visited in the detention center. He looked alive. He looked dangerous. He looked like a man who had nothing left to lose. Americus killed the engine. He stepped out of the truck, the rain soaking his jacket within seconds. He walked Tawa RDS the stage. No one stopped him. The crowd root, a tide of angry faces and clenched fists. They recognized him. They knew who he was. They let him pass because they wanted to see the show. Julian saw him. A slow, triumphant smile spread across his face. Ladies and gentlemen, he shouted, his voice amplified by the speakers, the man of the hour, the man who tried to destroy me, the man who would rather see his own son rot in a cage than admit he was wrong. My father, General Americus Stone. The crowd erupted in jeers. Someone threw a bottle. It shattered at Americus's feet. He didn't flinch. He kept walking, his eyes locked on Julian. You came, Julian said, his voice dripping with contempt. I knew you would. You could never resist the spotlight. You could never let me have a moment of my own. Americus reached the edge of the stage. He looked up at his son. This ends now, Julian. Julian laughed. You're right. It does. He reached into his vest and pulled out a pistol. The crowd gasped. A few people screamed, but no one ran. They were frozen, transfixed by the spectacle. This is the moment, Father, Julian said, his voice rising to a fever pitch. This is the moment I prove to the world what you really are. A tyrant, a fraud, a coward who hides behind the law and calls it justice. And Mayor Cuss didn't move. He didn't blink. He looked at the pistol, then back at his son's eyes. You won't shoot me, Julian. You've never had the courage to do anything yourself. You've always needed someone else to pull the trigger. Julian's face twisted. His hand trembled. For a fleeting second, Americus saw the boy he had raised, the boy he had loved. And then he saw the monster that had taken his place. Goodbye, Father, Julian whispered. The shot rang out. The crowd scattered. Americus felt his knees, but he didn't feel the bullet. He felt the mud beneath his hands, the rain on his face, the cold weight of a truth he had known all along. He looked up. Julian was sta ring at him, his eyes wide with disbelief. The pistol was still in his hand. Smoke curled from the BA rel. But Americus was still breathing. He looked down at his chest. No wound, no blood. He looked back at Julian, and then he saw the red bloom spreading across Julian's own vest. A second shot. A third. Julian staggered, his eyes still locked on his father's. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He fell back way RD, tumbling off the stage in a mud that Americus rose to his feet. He looked into the crowd. A woman stood at the edge, a rifle in her hands, her face a mask of grief. It was the mother of Thomas Williams, the young corporal whose picture had frozen on the screen. She had come for her own justice, and Americus walked to his son's body. Julian's eyes were open, sta ring at the rain. He was gone. Americus knelt in the mud. He looked at the face of his son. He didn't speak. He didn't weep. He just closed Julian's eyes. Then he stood up and walked away into the storm.